Welcome to your Week 5 lecture in medical terminology. This week we are covering the endocrine system and everyone's favorite connective tissue, the blood. Let's get started. Here's the endocrine system. Here are your objectives for the endocrine system. They're the same ones you have in Connect. The endocrine system is one of the two body messengers, with the other being the nervous system. Instead of electrical pulses down an axon, the endocrine system uses chemical messengers called hormones. The endocrine glands secrete hormone into the blood or surrounding tissues. Hormone finds a target cell or tissue to bind to affect its metabolism. A target cell or a tissue has a receptor for that specific hormone on its surface. Unlike endocrine glands, the other type of gland in the body, called exocrine glands, we talked about in the integumentary system, will secrete a product out of a duct onto the body's surface. Let's do some combining forms while looking at the anatomy of the endocrine system. Start with the most superior. You'll see the hypothalamus, then the pituitary gland. Adeno refers to gland. Next is the thyroid gland, and posterior to the thyroid gland are the parathyroid glands. There are usually 4 of these. Thyro and thyroido refer to the thyroid gland, while parathyroido refers to the parathyroid gland. Next is the thymus, and lower are the adrenal glands that sit on the kidneys like little hats. Adreno and adrenalo refer to the adrenal glands. Pancreas is just behind this and posterior to the stomach, and pancreato refers to the pancreas. Lastly are the reproductive glands. This is either the ovaries or the testes, and gonado refers to the sex glands. Here's a diagram of the basic functions of each of the endocrine glands. The hypothalamus regulates the pituitary, and the pituitary regulates pretty much all the other endocrine glands, with a few exceptions. The thyroid regulates metabolism. Parathyroid aids in calcium regulation, along with the thyroid too. The adrenal glands help with stress, metabolism, and electrolyte balance. The pancreas regulates glucose. Pineal gland with sleep cycle, ovaries and testes with sexual characteristics, and the thymus aids in immunity. Here we have the hypothalamus. It's superior to the pituitary. The pituitary sits in the sella turcica of the sphenoid bone in the skull and is divided into anterior and posterior portions based on how the hypothalamus communicates with it and what hormone each release. The hypothalamus regulates the pituitary gland by either stimulating or inhibiting hormone release from it. Let's start with the anterior pituitary or adenohypophysis. The anterior pituitary communicates with the hypothalamus through blood vessels, sending regulating hormones from the hypothalamus, and this is why it's called the adenohypophysis. The hormones produced and released by the anterior pituitary help with stimulating growth, metabolism, reproduction, stress response, lactation, and other functions. The posterior pituitary or neurohypophysis communicate with the hypothalamus via nerves, and this is why it's called the neurohypophysis. The 2 major hormones released from here are the oxytocin and ADH, also known as vasopressin. So what are the hormones of the anterior and posterior pituitary? Let's go over them in more detail. First, growth hormone helps us grow and comes from the anterior pituitary. I think we're going to need to mow the grass again. FSH and LH come from the anterior pituitary and aid with fertility, while oxytocin from the posterior pituitary helps with childbirth and natural delivery. Prolactin comes from the anterior pituitary and helps with lactation or milk production. ADH, also known as vasopressin from the posterior pituitary, helps us retain water. A lack of this will cause diabetes insipidus. Lastly, TSH stimulates the release of thyroid hormone, and ACTH stimulates adrenal gland hormone release of stress hormones, and both are from the anterior pituitary. Now we'll go on to the thyroid, which releases thyroid hormone that increases metabolism. The thyroid also aids with calcium control, with using calcitonin to lower calcium levels in the blood when they get too high. The parathyroid gland releases parathyroid hormone to raise calcium levels when they're too low, along with the previously mentioned calcitonin from the thyroid that lowers calcium levels when they're too high. They both make up an important negative feedback mechanism to maintain calcium homeostasis. The adrenal glands are located on the superior surface of the kidney, and they look like little hats sitting on top of them. They help us when we are under stress and aid in electrolyte balance. The cortex releases cortisol and other steroids like hormones to help with stressful situations, like this poor lady here who has all this paperwork to do. The medulla of the adrenal gland releases epinephrine, also known as adrenaline, and together with cortisol and other steroids, they help us get through stressful situations. The pancreas is located just posterior to the stomach and releases insulin to lower glucose after a meal. And when we have hypoglycemia or low blood glucose levels, glucagon is released to raise our blood glucose level. Remember, gluco refers to glucose. Those pancakes sure look good. Now, let us look at some pathology of the endocrine system. First, pancreatitis occurs when the pancreas becomes inflamed. This is usually due to too much alcohol consumption. It causes nausea, vomiting, also called emesis, and abdominal pain. Gigantism is way too much growth hormone as a child before puberty and before the growth plates are closed. Acromegaly is also too much growth hormone, but occurs in adulthood after puberty when the growth plates have already closed. So only certain areas like the forehead, nose, hands, and feet get bigger, and the patient is not taller than usual. Graves' disease is hyperthyroidism or overactive thyroid. A patient like this would have a rapid heart rate called tachycardia, weight loss, leg cramps, and bulging of the eyes, as seen here. This is called exophthalmos. Some may have enlarged thyroids, which are called goiters. Myxedema is really bad hypothyroidism or underactive thyroid. This patient would have depression, weight gain, low heart rate, which is known as bradycardia, and would feel cold very often. They also have this puffy-looking face that you see here. You may be asking yourself right now, what is diabetes? Well, I'll answer this burning question for you right now. Basically, diabetes is a metabolic disease process. It can be in the form of diabetes mellitus or mellitus, which deals with the insulin either low or ineffective, or diabetes insipidus with ADH or vasopressin being low. Both have polydipsia or drinking often or a lot, polyuria or urinating often, but only diabetes mellitus has polyphagia or eating a lot. Diabetes mellitus has two types. Type 1 is insulin dependent, meaning they lack insulin and must take insulin to live. Insulin is given subcutaneously. Most patients with type 1 diabetes know that they have it as the symptoms are so severe. Type 2 diabetics make up the majority of diabetics in the world. They lack insulin sensitivity and actually make a lot of insulin for themselves. It is preventable in most cases and due to metabolic syndrome that comes from poor diet and exercise habits. Most type 2 diabetics do not know they even have this disease and go undiagnosed. So both types of diabetics can have complications from their disease. Both can get hyperglycemic if not treated properly, but can also become hypoglycemic if their blood glucose level gets too low. Severe type 1 diabetics can have diabetic ketoacidosis or DKA, which is a severe life-threatening emergency if their glucose gets too high. Both types can get diabetic retinopathy, which can cause blindness, diabetic nephropathy, which can cause the patient to have to go on dialysis, and diabetic neuropathy, which can cause leg pains, numbness, and result in diabetic foot ulcers as they step on things on the floor and not feel the injuries as non-diabetics do. This can lead to leg and foot amputations. Cushing syndrome comes from too much cortisol from the adrenal cortex of the adrenal gland. This leads to a patient like this with the classic moon face. They can also have a buffalo hump on their upper back. Because you demanded it, we'll go on to the blood. If erythro means red and cyte, as you recall from previous chapters, means cell, then erythrocyte is a red blood cell. Here are the objectives on the blood. They're the same ones you have in Connect. The blood is a connective tissue and is a mixture of cells, water, and various other agents. Blood does many things for us. It transports nutrients and oxygen as well as our previously mentioned hormones throughout the body. It gets rid of waste by taking them to liver and kidneys. It maintains other fluid volume homeostases, and it helps regulate body temperature. Now to some terms. Coagulation refers to making a blood clot, while agglutino refers to agglutination, or the clumping of red blood cells due to a blood reaction, usually due to allergy or immune reaction. This is how we get blood typing done. Erythro means red and leuko means white. Hemo or hemato refers to the blood itself. Hemoglobin is found in erythrocytes and carry oxygen for us throughout the body. Phago refers to phagocytosis or devouring, mainly devouring other cells. Eosino refers to eosinophils like this little guy here. White blood cells or leukocytes help us fight infections. Neutrophils are the most numerous of white blood cells and fight bacteria. Lymphocytes fight viruses. Eosinophils fight parasites and are involved in allergic reactions. Platelets are thrombocytes, as the one shown here, labeled in the scanning electron microscope image as this guy, helps us make blood clots and aid in wound healing. Blood is a connective tissue, and like all connective tissues, it has a matrix, and this is the plasma. The plasma makes up most of the blood and consists of mainly water, but it also has proteins and some chemicals as well. Human blood comes in specific types. There are 4 types: type A, B, AB, and O. These depend on the antigens located on the surface of the red blood cell. O is the absence of these antigens, and also important is the Rh factor and whether it is present or not. This is called positive or negative. The universal recipient is AB positive since it has all the antigens and cannot have an allergic reaction to blood, while O negative is the universal donor and can donate to any other type. Without blood clotting, we would bleed to death if we were cut or a blood vessel ruptured. Platelets, as said before, are primarily responsible for blood clots, but there are other factors involved too, and they're also very important, like fibrinogen and prothrombin. Anemia is a lack of erythrocytes. You will see low red blood cell count, hemoglobin, hematocrit in these patients. The most common type of anemia is called iron deficiency anemia. Sickle cell anemia is an autosomal recessive in its genetics, as both alleles or genes from mom and dad must be diseased for you to have it. If at least one gene is good, then there will only be sickle cell trait. Any disease of the blood is genetically called a dyscrasia. Polycythemia is way too many erythrocytes. If erythrocytes were dollars, then we'd all be rich here. Hemophilia, which is a severe bleeding disorder, was called the disease of the royalty, as many royals have had it over the years. It is a sex-linked or X-linked trait. Women can only be carriers for the most part, but males are the sufferers as they only have one X chromosome. So if they get this diseased X chromosome, then they'll have the disease. A much milder bleeding disorder, which many walk around with every day and don't even know it, is von Willebrand's disease, which is a lack of von Willebrand factor. Many patients only learn they have this following a surgery, and because of heavier than usual bleeding, they are tested for it. Common lab tests concerning blood you should be aware of are the complete blood count, which counts all the blood cells present on a microscope visual field to estimate the amount of blood you have. Blood chemistries like basic and comprehensive metabolic panels, which look at blood electrolytes, blood cultures, which look for bacterial infection and other pathogens, and measurements of how much blood you have in your body, like the hemoglobin and hematocrit. The ESR or sedimentation rate of erythrocytes is used to look for inflammation in the body, like joint inflammation and various autoimmune diseases. To find out about any and all blood disorders, you must do a bone marrow biopsy. Remember, the blood is made by the red and yellow marrow from the bone marrow, or from the bone. Progenitor cells located there help us get to the root of the problem. We need to look at them. The bone marrow biopsy is usually done at the hip, posteriorly, with the patient lying prone. The bone marrow is accessed easiest in this way. We've reached the end of this week's lecture. It's time for some fireworks. Thanks for watching.